Great debate last night. I thought it was interesting.
I thought it was too. I thought it was really
good.
Me too. Me too. I think the real winner last night, out of all of them, was Megyn Kelly.
She was great.
She was really, really good. She's on a plane today. We're hoping to catch her in between. But she was the winner. This was the best debate. She held everybody's feet to the fire. She asked tough questions. She was fair. She told people, shut up, nobody can hear you, when they were talking over each other, and it ended it. Yeah. I mean, I thought she was really, really good.
Yeah, really, really good. She you know, her questions, and this goes back to her previous debate performances as well. They're very well laid out. You might not like the question, and I think that's kind of the point with her. She's trying to ask a question that's going to put you in a difficult position to see what you can do with it, and that's the whole point of these debates.
But she wasn't asking
unfair.
them for liberal reasons.
Right.
She was framing all of her questions the way a conservative would want it framed. Mm-hmm. There are certain things that we want answered that the liberals don't even understand.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about how the left handles these debates, they ask the questions that they care about, which makes sense, right? But they ask, hey, what about January 6th or whatever? And instead, you got questions last night that I think that were substance related. They were actually issue related. They were policy related. They were important questions that all the candidates needed to answer.
Correct.
And I thought she did a great job. And, you know, the whole debate overall I thought was really good. I mean, maybe it's a low hurdle to clear to say it's the best one of the four.
Right.
But I thought, look, if you take it out of the context of the actual election, which is difficult here to do, I understand it. You have a candidate who's 20 or 30 points ahead, depending on which state you're looking at, and
nobody's
he's not
close.
there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a big asterisk to all of this.
But you know what? I wouldn't do it either. If I were Donald Trump, I was this far ahead, I wouldn't do it either.
I think that's, strategically, I agree with you.
Yes.
Like if I'm
that's all there is. When you are trying to win, you use strategy, and this is the best strategy. Honestly, if I were Donald Trump, I would consider running the campaign that Joe Biden did, with an exception of the, one chair and then a big circle around it, and then like 12 feet later, another circle with a chair in the middle.
Gosh, remember that?
Yeah, it was horrible.
What a weird
But
time.
I would just stay quiet because everybody is hanging themselves and Joe Biden's economy and his, the way he speaks, and just hope that he would be shamed into a debate, because we do need a debate between the two of them.
Do you think that's really an option for Donald Trump? Because I think he's doing that now at some level with the assistance of the media. The media seems to not really want to be focusing on Donald Trump right now for whatever reason. You talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
A former president of the United States was testifying on stand in a trial. And did we see any coverage of it at all?
I didn't.
Other than a quick maybe mention or headline?
Yeah,
normally, they'd be wall to wall saying how bad this guy is or whatever they want to say. Right now, it seems like they have made the decision, along with a bunch of Democrats, that the person they want to face in this election is Donald Trump. That may very well be a terrible decision for them. As we saw in 2016, they made the same call, and it didn't work at all. But if they're making that choice, it seems like once we get past the primary, Donald Trump is locked in as the candidate. They're no longer going to leave every word he says on the sidelines.
Okay, all right. Unless...
Do you believe that?
They're dumb enough and out of touch enough to do that. Okay,
that's a pre-qualifier.
But
for sure.
let me give you this. Comedian Bill Burr. Okay, he came out, launched into a rant, and he said, "You effing stupid liberals, what are you doing? You're making Donald Trump a martyr, and he's going to come back and win again." And I think that's true. Remember, his poll numbers went up when they started putting him, up as a martyr and going after him. And the left just doesn't understand. This is Chris Christie. He got booed. Do we happen to have that clip? Last thing he said was that Donald Trump wasn't going to be...
Yeah, he
wasn't going to be voting.
Right. It was part of his final statement there, and he was saying, picture yourself going to the polls in November. One thing you won't be seeing is Donald Trump there because he won't be able to vote because he'll be a felon by then.
And the whole place booed.
Yeah.
And it's because here's what he's missing. If Donald Trump were being tried fairly, he was charged fairly, then it would be a different story. But most people don't feel that this is anything but a political trial. And so every time you go after him, you make him stronger because people are like, this isn't going to stand. This is the problem with this country.
And I think we can all agree with certainty that that is the effect on Republican primary voters.
Yes.
Right? Like the question is whether that is the effect on general election voters, and that's a much more complicated question.
Yes.
Right now,
especially independents.
Right now, this is a good example of this. Right now, Donald Trump's polls look pretty good in the general. They look as good or better than any of the other candidates.
Right.
Even Nikki Haley's polls have also looked pretty strong, but there's even some polls where Trump's ahead of Haley running in a general election. The issue, of course, with this is we also are showing in these polls, 10 and 12% for RFK Jr. And you're seeing Cornel West at 2%. When we get further on in this process, what happens? One of the big, if you look at the latest polls on Joe Biden, he is down. These are terrible polls for him. And typically, I think we would all look at that and celebrate, right? Okay, people are waking up, right? This is a good thing. Joe Biden's polls are down. He's a weaker candidate. Good, right? That's good. The problem with that is when you look deeper at those polls, one of the reasons you're seeing some of this erosion is because younger voters that are hardcore Democrats are saying, I don't like the way Joe Biden is so pro-Israel. Now, number one, it's possible. That's just the reality. And they never want to vote. They just go somewhere else. It's possible. But when we get, after a couple $1 billion are spent, and we are now in October of 2024, do you think those younger voters whose complaint about Joe Biden is that he's too pro-Israel right now are going to come back home? They might just stay home, and that might be the best thing possible, honestly.
Right.
Because they're not going to go to Donald Trump. He's pro-Israel. I mean, clearly. Much more than Joe Biden. So that weakness is, we don't know how real it is. We know that Joe Biden is a weak candidate, but the reason why other candidates on the Republican side are beating Joe Biden handily is largely because of this type of erosion. Erosion from Democrats, younger Democrats that are not typical Republican voters. So if they come home like they usually do, I mean, we know what happens with these Republican or these third-party candidates. Gary Johnson was showing up at 10 and 12% of the polls. People don't forget that. It didn't happen. It never holds. So if that does happen and people say, okay, forget that, I'm going back home, I'm going to Joe Biden, this election's too close, I don't want to throw away my vote. We know these arguments. If that happens, it's going to get much more difficult. I
really believe the only way that happens is if the press brings the half the country back to this place that Donald Trump is Hitler. And I don't know if that works universally anymore. And here's why. Joe Biden conned a lot of people. The Democrats conned a lot of people that he was going to bring back normalcy. Yeah. Well, we know this isn't normal. Okay, the country is hurting, both Republicans and Democrats. The country is falling apart, and everybody knows it. So he doesn't have well, I'm not going to be him. Right, but you're you.
Right, that was his strength in 2020.
Correct.
His strength was to say, I'm not him, and look at me, I'm going to return you to the normal times.
Right, I'm not going to be crazy, and it didn't happen. So there's a lot of people that will just stay home. Unfortunately, if Donald Trump is the nominee, there might be a lot of Republicans that would stay home as well. Although I just don't think that is as true as everybody wants you to believe.
Yeah, I don't think there's really a problem with Donald Trump and Republicans. In fact, in
well,
some
you
ways,
have the Lynn Cheneys, the Liz Cheneys.
Yeah, but that's nobody, right? I mean,
right. I think that might actually hurt Biden more.
Could.
Yeah,
it could. It really could. And, some of these polls have shown the RFK thing going both ways, but it seems to be hurting Joe Biden more. I think if you look at where this might go over a long period of time, you just have to factor it in. I think you got to price it in your head. The media is not going to act like they are now during the general election. That might be fine. I mean, Donald Trump has survived that already. He already had a really negative media and won in 2016. He's already been able to do it. So maybe he'll be able to do it again. But you can't look at the current situation and think this is how it's going to go. I mean, it may very well be also he goes through these trials and people are so upset about it and think he's being targeted that they all side with him and he wins easily, right? Like that's a possibility too. But the media is going to do everything they can once he gets this nomination to take him out. And at some level, that's true with these other candidates as well. But with these other candidates, you have the possibility of essentially what the Biden approach was, right? Look, you guys have just lived through 4 years of Joe Biden. I won't be him. It's going to be difficult for Donald Trump to make that same argument because he's got that same type of thing built into him. Everyone's made up their mind on both of these people. You know, Haley, DeSantis have a little bit of more of an opening there.
It may come down to the vice president because I think everybody is like, man, if he wins, I don't want Kamala Harris to be the president. Yeah. That would be a nightmare. And so it may come down to the vice president.
If you were doing a draft of who you thought Donald Trump would pick as his VP, who's your first pick?
First pick.
Again, not who you think it should be,
no,
but
I know.
who he will pick.
I know. Oh.
This is a tough one.
I know. I go back and forth between Ramaswamy and Nikki. Nikki would be smart because she'll pacify the old guard Republican, and she's a fighter, but he's not going to like that.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, he obviously put her in his administration.
I
right?
know, but there's been a deep falling out since then.
Yeah.
Ramaswamy is still fighting for Donald Trump.
Oh yeah. So there's no light between them at all, really, at this point. But you know, and it's interesting because Haley strikes me as a Pence-like pick. Right.
Yes,
it's a little bit different, obviously, but like it's someone who is, I think, respectable, quote unquote, would please a lot of those voters who think, you know, Donald Trump is, you know, his tweets are too bad and all that other stuff. And that's what he needed in 2016, honestly.
And could take the job.
I don't know that he did. Does he need that in 2024, though? I think in
could take the job?
He needs someone who could take the job, clearly. Yeah. That's obviously the number one role. But with Pence, he picks someone, number one, to please evangelicals who were very on the fence about Donald Trump early on. And, you know, you get somewhat of that with Nikki Haley. I think you still get, but I don't think that's what he needs anymore. His strength with evangelicals is through the roof. But he does get that. You get a steady hand feel from Nikki Haley. Ramaswamy, you don't really get that. I like Vivek.
No, but you get a game changer.
You get a game changer, and you get a bulldog who will go on television 900 times a day and say and just argue with passion for every point that Donald Trump makes. And I think Donald Trump would like that. He likes those people.
I agree, except Ramaswamy is a star to some degree. Now, that is faded. People don't like him as much, which Donald Trump would like. He doesn't want somebody that will compete with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's true.
He wants, you know, somebody who's solid for certain reasons, whatever, but you work for me. And Ramaswamy, I think, could do that. And you're right, he is a bulldog. I would lean towards Ramaswamy as Donald Trump's pick. I have for a long time. I thought that Donald Trump was going to pick him. But I think if Nikki Haley is a strong, you know, number two in the primaries, if she starts to become just a juggernaut next to him, he'd probably be foolish not to take her.
We should also point out that precisely 0 votes have been cast in the primary. So he has not won the primary yet.
I know.
But it is.
And it could all change.
Yeah, you're looking ahead a little bit here. But I thought it was an interesting night last night.